History laid the foundation
that informs our conversation. Welcome to the classroom.
From the church to the streets, and even in the suites, and all around the world. I'm gonna keep it real in the classroom.
Fannie Lou's classroom. Fannie Lou's classroom. Fannie Lou's classroom.
Good afternoon. I'm so excited about today. Well, I'm excited about every episode, but I'm super duper excited about today's episode because I not only have two amazing guests, but they also happen to be sister friends of mine. So I'm just excited to have them here in the same space together, whether that's virtual and in person, but we're all here. Spirit is moving, and spirit is not on the table, but it is certainly moving through technology. And as we see here in the space, so check it. If you're already watching, you're on Fannie Lou's Classroom, but make sure you let people know about Fannie Lou's Classroom, to like us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, like us on YouTube, and hit the subscribe notification bell so you can be alerted when we go live. And of course, as we always do when we open up, we want to give a major shout out to our engineer, Brooke Mosley, who is always in the house handling the business. Let's give Brooke a round of applause. And so this week, Cheryl and Shanika have been switching off on me where they both not here at the same time, ladies. So Shanika had to step away today, but we have Cheryl, who is part of our team. So she's here. So we're going to give her a shout out for being back in the house after a brief absence. But we're glad to have her with us on today. And so, this season, we added a little bit to Fannie Lou's Classroom. If you want to support us, if you want to go ahead and sports Fannie Lou's Classroom, we have a way of you doing that. So we now have T-shirts that you can be able to purchase, Fannie Lou's Classroom T-shirts, and certainly these proceeds help to make this show continue, and it's able to help us to be able to give a little something of appreciation to those who bring so much wisdom and knowledge that surely that money cannot buy, and we can't put a price tag on. So you can go to friendshipwest.org/justice, and on our justice page, you'll see a Fannie Lou Classroom tab, and it will just say purchase your T-shirt here. Hit that button and make sure you support Fannie Lou's Classroom. We have a wonderful model. Thank you, Cheryl, for modeling our T-shirt on today. Because, she doesn't like the camera, but, she got on today for the cause. So thank you, Cheryl. So, look, I'm going to go ahead and, what you say?
I said you're welcome.
So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our two guests for today, and we're just going to jump into this conversation, which I think is a very important topic, timely topic. This is going to be good. So let me just introduce everyone, and then we'll get going. So first we have Dr. Keri Day. Keri Day is an associate professor of constructive theology and African-American religion at Princeton Theological Seminary in Princeton, New Jersey. She earned a BS in political science and economics from Tennessee State University and a Master of Arts in religion and ethics from Yale Divinity School, and her PhD in religion from Vanderbilt University. Her teaching and research interests are in Womanist feminist theologies, social critical theory, cultural studies, economics, and Afro-Pentecostalism. She has authored 4 academic books: Unfinished Business, Black Women, the Black Church, and the Struggle to Thrive in America, Religious Resistance to Neoliberalism, Womanist and Black Feminist Perspectives, Notes of a Native Daughter, Testifying in Theological Education, and her most recent book, Azusa Reimagined, A Radical Vision of Religious and Democratic Belonging. She has also been recognized by NBC News as one of 6 Black women at the center of gravity in theological education in America. Alongside her scholarship, she also engages public policy leaders. She has participated in White House briefings in Washington, D.C. to discuss issues related to economic policy, religious freedom, faith-based initiatives, human rights efforts, and peace-building efforts around the world. She's been a guest political commentator on KERA, NPR, DFW Fox News, and Huffington Live on issues related to faith and politics. She has written for New York Daily News, The Christian Century, The Feminist Wire, and Huffington Post. Let's give a major shout out and welcome to Dr. Keri Day. Then we have the Reverend Dr. Irie Lynn Session. Raised in South Bronx and the New York City housing projects, Dr. Irie Lynn Session is a spiritual entrepreneur, TEDx presenter, award-winning minister, Amazon best-selling author, pastor, womanist preacher, church planter with over 30 years in social work and ministry, who has helped hundreds of women from all walks of life to live their dreams by doing what they've been wired to do. Her ministry interests and social justice commitments are situated at the intersection of black women's flourishing, womanist preaching, and dismantling white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. Dr. Irie holds an undergraduate degree in social work from Oklahoma Christian University, a Master of Divinity with certificate in Black Church Studies from Bright Divinity School, and a Doctor of Ministry in Transformative Leadership and Prophetic Preaching from Colgate Rochester Crozer Divinity School in Rochester, New York. Dr. Irie is co-pastor of The Gathering, a womanist church, of the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ in Dallas, Texas. She's been an ordained pastor with the Disciples of Christ for over 17 years. Dr. Irie is also CEO of Dream Big, coaching and consulting, where she strategizes with women in ministry and the marketplace to discern and eliminate barriers to flourishing. She guides women in identifying and implementing creative strategies for leveraging their professional expertise, innate abilities, latent creativity, and innovative capacities to live their dreams, make a difference in the world, and achieve economic agency. Dr. Irie is co-author of The Gathering, a Womanist Church, Origins, Stories, Sermons, and Litanies. She is also author of Badass Women of the Bible and Murdered Souls, Resurrected Lives. All are available on Amazon.com, BarnesandNobles.com. Her latest journal article with Luther Seminary's Word and World is titled Sawabona in a Pandemic. Wow, Black Women Embody Ecclesiology and Sacred Spaces in Cyberspace. Woo, let's welcome Dr. Irie Lynn Session. Now look, let me just say this. I read all that about Dr. Session and about Dr. Day. But let me just tell you, these are just two flat out amazing human beings who from afar and up close have been.
It's okay. Oh. Ooh. It's okay.
Who have been sisters to me. So they're more than just what I read. They're just amazing human beings. Okay.
I was already on the verge.
Amen.
So thank you to Dr. Day and to Dr. Session. And I learned so much more about you reading your bios. So, wow. So I may come back to that. So let me just jump into these questions.
Okay. Let's do that.
Let me clear my contacts so I can see my. And that's why I love Fannie's Classroom. It's just organic. We're not just so tied and tethered to an agenda.
Exactly.
And it's the spirit of Fannie Lou Hamer. She was a woman who loved people, and she had a love ethic, in my opinion, that really understood what it meant to be a truth teller, to receive healing of her own, but offer that, and to prepare people for the journey. And so maybe that's part of what I'm feeling. That I feel her spirit is heavy today.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think too, you so embody that in your own way. And so I know, Dr. Day, we were talking earlier, and you were saying you're in the academy and how you miss being in the street, right, and being with people in the front line. But I think about the fact that you too also, right, you embody that spirit of Fannie Lou Hamer in the work that you do. So she never went to a school, but she was well educated, a well developed theology. Much of what I think the Academy writes about that she understood. So I just want to tell you that you two are doing the great work. Even though I know it can feel like a disconnect sometimes, but you're there. As long as you're connected with us, you in the street, okay? That's right. And you're on the front line.
Amen.
So, okay. I think I calmed down enough to move on. So one of the things I want to start off with, so Dr. Day, this question is for you, but certain Dr. Irie, if you want to jump in, please do. But one of the things I think about when it comes to Black women, I go back to enslavement, and I think about labor and productivity, and the ways in which that existed for Black women in two ways. One, it was their labor and productivity, whether they were chopping the cotton, chopping tobacco, harvesting, threshing the rice was their labor and what they could put out. But also their bodies themselves were about labor and productivity in terms of getting pregnant, giving birth, so that baby then became a commodity for enslavers that increased their wealth, right? And so let's talk about, I would like to kind of situate that. Can you talk a little bit more historically? I think it's important to situate it historically as we then talk about how a wage gap still is persistent and consists in today's time. So the question is, throughout American history, right, the value in productivity of Black women's labor and productivity has not been acknowledged. And how has this contributed to the wage gap we still see today? The lack of acknowledgement, the lack of paying Black women their worth. How is that situated and rooted in, right, this long legacy and tradition? So I want to throw that to you, Dr. Day, and then Dr. Sessions, certainly if you want to chime in, please do.
Absolutely. I'm so happy we're actually beginning with slavery and plantation economies. But I have to say thank you, Reverend Ayers, for having me on what I believe is one of the most prophetic, creative podcasts, seriously, that we have going in the U.S. Fannie Lou's Classroom. I'm so grateful, that you've consecrated yourself. Your life has been a consecration to loving Black people. And so I honor you, and it is mutual what you express. You have been my teacher as I was doing, especially when I began my career, and I was writing and attempting to connect the ideas that I had to the streets, to, historically activists and what has gone on. And you were my teacher. And so I'm just so grateful for you. So again, I'm just thank you for inviting me to be with you. So, this is really, really important, right, that we begin here with plantation economies, because just as a backdrop, I was trained in economics, but I ended up going into theological education. And one of the things that a lot of economists, and this actually relates to the degradation and dehumanization of Black women's, not just being, but as an extension, their labor and ideas of productivity, is that it's often assumed that kind of the modern economy that we have today is sort of a break and is a radical difference from plantation economies. So, economists think of the markets that we have today as grounded in effectiveness, in efficiency, in modern financial practices. But not only that, in a kind of colorblindedness, right? That it's not about when you come to the market, people are not making their decisions as rational actors based upon any particular prejudices or biases. People are going to choose what is in their rational economic interest. So as a result, they see no connection between plantation economies and the degradation of Black life to what we have today in terms of modern political economy. So I'm glad you began there, because this history of what I write about this as racial capitalism, this idea that from the beginning of the plantation economy, what we see is structural racism as an ordering principle and a rational logic that fuels and drives modern capitalism in the United States. So, you think about, and this was even evident in the 1619 Project, right, that the first understanding of collateral was the slave. Slaves actually were used as collateral for loans in early plantation economy, right? But not only that, you have the commodification, objectification in the financial industry of slaves, because slaves could also be used as a way to obtain a mortgage, right? They could be used as sort of down payments on particular properties. Or another way of saying slaves in terms of objectification, the enslaved, I should say, in terms of objectification and commodification, some plantation owners would take out mortgages for the purchase price of the slave so that they could in some ways extract all the labor from a particular enslaved person over the course of the life and only put a little down in paying that enslaved person off. And so the point here is that when we talk about like wage inequality, when we talk about the degradation and the lack of concern, really the expropriation and exploitation of Black women's labor, what we're talking about is a logic that goes all the way back to the plantation economy, in which first Black folks were seen as commodities on the market in order to enrich the wealth of American empire. But there's a gender dimension here with Black women, right? The gender dimension is what you just said. We were raped as a way to create more free labor. We were not valued for our agency and subjectivity as such, but reproducing in a very crude sense, profit. And so with that being said, Black women were at the center of all of the reproductive labor that went into the economic quote unquote success of what we know as America today. So this history is really, really important. And the reason why is because today you have within our larger culture this idea that if people just work hard, they will succeed. If people just stop complaining, including the Black community, and educate themselves, that we will be in a better position in terms of the accumulation of wealth and, towards practices of thriving. But this is not the case. That what I've just described in terms of racial capitalism and Black women at the center of it, that logic still plays today in terms of the exploitation and the devaluation, not only of Black women's lives and bodies, but of their labor.
Can I jump on in that? Because that is thank you for laying that foundation, Dr. Day, the historical foundation of Black women's labor, and then bringing it on up to modern day, because you're absolutely spot on. And there is a report, maybe you've seen it, the status of Black women in corporate America, that really speaks to that, right? So that while Black women are in the labor force, we are significantly underrepresented in leadership roles. Black women are less likely to get the support and access they need to advance. In other words, Black women don't have those relationships with senior staff, with folk in the C-suite, right? That do the mentoring, right? Yeah. That bring you up into those leadership roles. Black women are significantly absent in corporate America from decision-making tables. Right? And in that report, it also says that, of course, we know women in general, right, are having a worse experience than men, right? Women of color are having a worse experience than women, but Black women in particular have the worst experience of all in corporate America. Everybody. So we're in these organizations and institutions, but we are not advancing to the degree that that our education, that our experience, that our expertise, that our brilliance says we ought to be.
Yes. Woo.
That's right. And I don't, because I know this is Reverend Ayers. You're moderating the program, but I just wanted to follow up, if I could, to something that Dr. Sessions said. I mean, I think about this. Like, how could it be that I think it's something like between 2014 and 2019, there was a 50% increase of Black women-owned businesses, 50%. And so we're clear that Black women are contributing to the economy in major ways. And this actually reflects some of the important research that Black women economists like Julianne Malveaux, like Nina Banks have already done, showing that even in the middle of the 20th century, the employment rates of Black women, especially Black women that were looking for work, were actually significantly higher. Not only that is proportionate to our population, not only higher than white women, but to get this, but higher than white men. And so this understanding that Black women are already contributive members to the economy, have been entrepreneurs, have been in the labor force contributing to the common good. And with this increase, how could it be that what we saw in the pandemic, for example, is that, of course, the pandemic hurt many businesses across the board, but the businesses that were flailing and hurting the most from unfair lending practices, from a lack of support, were Black businesses, and disproportionately Black women businesses, right? And so this is something that needs to be named because it shows that this is more than, Black women are lazy or Black women are complaining or they're incompetent, right? It's like you hear people saying that,
Right.
this, that, and the other, that there is a structural injustice here that needs to be attended to.
So were you going to say something, Dr. Session?
This may take us somewhere else, but this issue is even an issue in the church, in church leadership. Are we gonna get there?
Oh yeah, yes.
Okay.
We gotta.
Right.
We gotta get there. But I want to, because Well, let me stay here just for a moment. Then I want to shift to, because we're talking about Black women in corporate America. We're talking about Black women entrepreneurs. But what I want to switch to also are Black women who have those frontline jobs, who may not be entrepreneurs, who are not in corporate America. Those who really, when the pandemic hit, kept this country going.
That's right.
Right, but yet they don't have livable wages, don't have health care accessibility or affordability. It's just not there for them. So, Dr. Day, in your book, one of the things you said that poverty is produced and reproduced when the poor are locked out of America's wealth-producing structures. Right. So, what is the course correction? What do we do about that? Right, in terms of, because everybody probably won't be an entrepreneur, won't or may not go through the educational system to be put in a position to be in corporate America, but nevertheless, those Black women deserve living wages. They deserve, benefits and health care. So how do we disrupt this death dealing, to your point, white capitalist system that reproduces with intentionality poverty?
Yeah, so I think we have to, and this is just a beginning punch about what we need to do. But I think that it really means challenging really negative and harmful stereotypes and assumptions about Black women, both at the cultural level and then how it materializes in economic practice and policy. So, at the cultural level, I, especially in that same book, Unfinished Business, I spent a lot of time talking about how cultural representations of Black women historically and even now, Black women, for example, as, especially economically disadvantaged Black women who are just trying to make a living wage, by the way. They're trying to support their children, trying to have enough to do well and live lives of contentment, but nevertheless, they're typified as lazy, as angry, many of them as indolent even, pimping the system based off their reproductive capabilities, having children that the white taxpayers have to pay for. So you have these sort of cultural representations of Black women that literally, at least I argue there, are written into the economic practices, the financial practices that lock these same women out, right? And so I do really think that, and part, I think we'll get to this. This is, I think, part of the church's responsibility as well. But I think that this whole question of how Black women are rhetorically imagined in the American political imagination needs to really, really be addressed, right? And that is being addressed. You have plenty of activists and theologians and scholars that are doing that work. So I think that's the first thing. I don't think we can really have a fruitful conversation about these structural, material practices of injustice until we get at what's fueling it. And it's these malformed cultural understandings of who Black women are, not contributive members of society, when in fact we always have been, since we were forcibly taken from our homes, our countries, and placed on this soil. And then in terms of materially, there's so many things that I could say here about the material implications, what needs to happen at a policy level that I'm sure we're going to have much more discussion about here. But I will say one of the things that I appreciate about the framing of our discussion is us focusing, you having us focus, Reverend Ayers, on the wage gap, because there's been a lot of call for economic equality through economic redistribution and these sorts of things. That's all really important and good. But it is the case that I think part of what needs to be prioritized is income inequality. And income inequality, it is about the living wage, of course, but it's also about the way in which wealth is structured, right? What does it mean when you have CEOs, for example, that are being paid millions of dollars, and the service people who clean the buildings, who make sure that these people can do the work that they do day in, day out, are paid sometimes below a minimum wage?
Right.
What does that tell us? What does it mean when you have, for example, as teachers, when you have people in the entertainment industry being paid millions on top of millions and millions of dollars, and you have those that are responsible for the education of our children that are literally using their own money, their own meager salary to buy supplies for their class.
Right.
How do we, so it seems to me that there has to be a conversation about the way that money, that capital is actually structured in this society, which leads again to the question of income equality, to really even have a fruitful conversation about the question of wage disparity.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Session, were you going to say something? Like you were going, oh, okay. Okay. And you were saying something about, I don't watch the show all the time. I usually catch it when I'm traveling and it's on TV, Undercover Boss. Mm-hmm. And I'm always amazed that, are you familiar with that, Dr. Day?
I'm not.
So it's where like the CEO of a company, sometimes the owner, depending on the company, will go undercover in a disguise, and they will go all the way down to like the front line.
I know what you're talking about. Yep.
So, and every time I'm always amazed when I watch that, because at the end, they're going to always have a heartfelt story. Like the CEO is probably going to give them a $20,000 check, or they're going to do something to increase productivity, like give them new machines. I said, now, isn't that funny? They're just finding ways to band-aid. And of course, the people are grateful, right? Sure. But in my mind, I'm thinking, well, now you could do way more than that. Right, yeah. You can triple their pay. You can hire more people, so this one person is not being overworked. You can just give them another machine. You didn't say about increasing, the number of workers. So to your point, it's almost this notion, the way it's structured, how it's viewed. There's no thought process, or they don't care enough to say, well, how do we really make this more of a just and fair working situation where this, I guess, owner and labor, right, or employee, owner and employee kind of relationship, but it's still all about how they still maintain the power and, the bulk of the money and the profits, right, still stay at the top. Because he may have given that person $20,000. That's nothing to him, right?
That's right.
But then
it's nothing.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Reverend Ayers.
So, because one of the shows that happened, it was there wasn't a black woman, but there was two Hispanic men and a young white girl. And this is Rocket Fizz or something like that. At the end of the day, he gave one man, he gave their kids a college fund. Okay. The other some money. But to the white girl, he actually gave her, what do you call it? A franchise.
Mm.
Wow, that's interesting. Oh,
so that's generational wealth right there. That's generational wealth.
Why wouldn't he? Now, check this out. They work at the place. She was a cashier at a franchise where she worked for somebody else. Yeah. But he gave her own store.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So even just to your point, right? Because something about, and I'm sure for him, he probably saw what his daughter, his niece. Yeah. So to your point, there's also this whole idea when you were talking about just the cultural representation and how people are viewed. How that, I think that was so embedded in him. His first.
He didn't even realize that he was operating out of his own implicit bias.
That's right.
He didn't even realize.
Yeah.
And I, for me, this conversation, having been in corporate America, having been in the nonprofit sector for over 30 years, I mean, that was my entire first part of my life was working in structures and systems and institutions where I was making life better for people on the margins, the organizations and such. And it got for me to a place where I had to take my livelihood, my thriving out of the hands of other people.
Wow.
And so, what I want to talk about and want us to think about is what is our role and responsibility on supporting those frontline workers to think outside of the plantation, right? Do we see? Yeah. Because that's what I try to do. That's what I've been doing for the last almost 6 years. I did it for myself, figured out, okay, what skills does it take to work the front line? right? How have you been able to do that and actually identify and articulate? Because that's what we don't do enough of as Black folk and Black women. We don't think critically about the skills, the expertise, the ingenuity, the creativity that we have that have allowed us, enabled us to do these jobs.
Right.
Right? But when we delineate those things, then we see, okay, so I have the ability to really think critically. I can look at a situation and I can assess it. And I can make accurate judgments, or I have what's in you, that can be excavated, that can be leveraged to create something that the system will not support you in. That can help you, because I think that's a way for us to go. Yes, we have to go to Austin. We have to go to D.C., we have to picket, we have to protest, we have to know what all these bills are and vote, and we have to do all that stuff.
Right.
And I'm not saying we bypass one for the other.
Right.
I'm saying it's a both and.
I'm
saying we have to do that critical activism, organizing work, and we have to equip and prepare our people. Specifically, I'm talking about Black women, to create something for themselves.
Yes, absolutely.
With their own hands, with their own minds, with their own hearts, with their own creativity.
Yeah.
And I think just what you said alone, if someone just did their own asset mapping of themselves, that alone, you just never know what that can birth. And you can talk. We're gonna talk more about this with what you do, because I'm sure you've seen this happen. For women, because we're going to get to that, because I think that is so important, regardless of where you are, whatever work you're doing, and whether you're trying to be an entrepreneur, not how beneficial and helpful that is, because you never know what that may lead you into a whole nother pathway.
That's right.
So we'll talk about that too. So what I want to, let's just bounce around a bit, because since you're on entrepreneurship, I do want you to talk to us about what were the critical factors that led you to become a social entrepreneur.
I consider myself a spiritual entrepreneur. And I use that language of spiritual because for me, it is about creating a world that is more equitable for Black women. And for me, it flows out of my faith, and it flows out of my belief that I have within me, that all of us have within me, just this beautiful spirit of creativity, right? Because we image God, right? And God is the ultimate creator.
Right.
And because we image God, we have the capacity to create, right? And so for me, I consider myself a spiritual entrepreneur. And what motivated me, or what propelled me into this was really because of my own experience of, as I said before, of working in these organizations and institutions as a prophetic leader, right? And so what that meant for me was, no matter what situation I was in, no matter what job I had a sensitivity to see the injustice, to see the inequity in the organization. And because of who I am, I sensed the responsibility to give voice to it. Well, when you're in situations and you give voice to the inequity, to the injustice, no matter how sweet you make it, often, particularly if you're a Black woman, you're seen, as W.E.B. Du Bois said, the problem. And so rather than address the problem, they eliminate the problem. So at 58 years old, I was a problem that was eliminated. And I had to make some decisions for my life. How do I want to live the rest of it? You know, and so I began doing, that asset mapping. Thank you for that language. I didn't call it that, but that's exactly what it was. I began doing the asset mapping to see, because here's what I knew, and I'm just going to keep it 100. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's
So what I knew was that I could not ever again put myself in a situation where white women specifically had control over my livelihood.
Wow.
Never again. I knew I could not do that.
Yeah.
And so what people often do when, at 58, right, I'm thinking, okay, so let me hurry up and go look for another job. That's what most people would do.
Right.
Because you got to pay the bills, you got to do all this stuff. I knew this was Dr. Renita Weems talks about in her book, What Matters Most, she talks about there comes a time in many women's lives when they have to make critical life decisions. And the decision they make will determine where their life is going to go, how it's going to be for them. That was a critical life moment for me. And I'm not suggesting that for anybody else.
Right.
But you asked me about me.
Right.
And so I made that, and I was a single mom now. My daughter was an adult, a young adult, but she still lived with me, right? So I still had all those responsibilities.
Right.
Nevertheless, I made that decision that I knew what I could not do. Like physically, psychologically, emotionally, it was too. It cost me too much already.
And I think that's what you said is so important. And this, when you know what you're not gonna do,
right?
I think that's half the battle right there. I know what I'm not gonna do, right? So thank you for sharing that, because I think someone needs to hear that it's okay.
Yes.
And I like spiritual entrepreneur, because it's also about I'm taking this leap based on rooted in my faith. I know God's got me, so let me do what I need to do.
Yeah. And let me say, that sounds well and good too. That sounds good. It sounds, I know God got me, but let me tell you what I realized in the process. I realized that while all these years I thought I had faith in God, what I had faith in was that check that I got every 2 weeks.
Wow.
That's what I came to realize. And I heard our pastor, Dr. Haynes, say this one time, and I had already made this decision in my mind, but when I heard him say it, it affirmed what I was thinking. We say the Lord's Prayer, give us this day our daily bread. We don't live like that. We don't live like, give us this day. I began the process of really living, God, give me this day my daily bread.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess because for me, and that probably just how I live life. I never thought about. Yeah, he has said that. I guess for me, I really be feeling, I really be feeling like,
yes,
I'm like no, right. That I'm like no, God, and I think when I say for me that God's got me, because here's what I've known growing up. I had an older sibling, a brother, but just my personality was just different than most people in the family. Right, so now I tell people I own that. I know I'm special, right? I know I have a very particular personality. I know that about me, but oftentimes that made me feel alone.
Yeah.
So I just learned how to, the older I got, I'm like, okay, I never really. Don't get me wrong, we still need people, but for the most part, which is probably why I tend to be a loner. Yeah, people don't know that. They just assume. I know a lot of people, but a lot of people don't know me.
Yeah, I hear you.
And so, so oftentimes, that could be a plus or minus. People didn't assume a lot about you, right? And so I was well, I guess it's just me and God.
Yeah.
When I moved to Dallas, didn't know nobody. Packed up my little Toyota Tercel. Yeah. Moved here, and just posted up, met somebody. They invited me to Friendship West. I moved here January 98, I think. I got involved in the National Council of Negro Women, and I met a young lady named Jaquita Duncan, who was a member of Friendship West. I was living in Northeast Fort Worth, and she said, and I didn't know what I was coming here for. I just wanted to move from Memphis. I was flipping through a fashion magazine. You know how you see it has like London, Paris. I said, well, I'll go to Dallas. It was really that's really how I decided to come here.
I understand.
Right. Just crazy.
That's the same thing that happened to me. I was living in Austin, working in banking, right?
Oh,
right out of,
okay.
Got a degree in social work, moved to Austin, but worked in banking. A branch manager of a savings and loan at the time. That's when we had savings and loans. Right. But I heard, after about 4 or 5 years working in banking, that I knew in a spiritual sense, this is not it for me. This not. I'm not supposed to be helping rich people get richer. That's not what it is. And I sensed, I call it the Macedonian call, very clearly. moved to Dallas. And that's when my social work career and trajectory took off. Yeah.
Well, see, at least you had something telling you that. I ain't had it. I just moved.
Yeah.
Now looking back, right?
Yeah.
I can spiritualize it and say the Lord
Sure,
was in it all
I love
alone.
it. Yeah.
And so move, join. I could probably visit the first Sunday in March, join the second Sunday. And that's really where my spiritual formation, that's where all that really, so this is really the only church I've really known.
Yeah.
I didn't join church till 18 in California. I joined, moved back home, went to school. In college, I barely went to church, like most people probably, right? So this is really what I've known. And how I've grown was here at Friendship West. And so,
a great place to grow.
I couldn't have landed in a better, honestly.
You could not.
And knowing, I was still I was still in my early 20s. So I'm still, learning and growing. I think anywhere else probably would have broke me.
Yeah. Oh, I do.
So I think, yes, I can look back and say God definitely had me on the right and landed me in the right place to grow and to really flourish.
Yeah.
Because again, didn't grow up in church, so I didn't know the idea that women weren't supposed to be in leadership, that women were, I didn't know that. Because this is all I ever knew. Now, once I got involved in friendship with other churches, I was like, oh, well, our church different. You know what I mean? So it's been such a blessing to me, which I want to now go shift into, because the black church is my thing, right? And I tell people for all of the flaws and faults, and we do have many, and we do have a lot of work we have to do. And I think this year at Proctor, I think it was Reverend Andrea Alexander when she stood up and said, and we're going to do some truth telling. We also need to start right here in the church, right? So I also want to let's talk about the role of the black church, capital B, church, in addressing, let me ask it this way. One, which I know the answer, but let's talk about it. Should the church have an economic justice platform? What role does the church play in dealing with this wage gap when it comes to black women? And then role does the church play in supporting black-owned, women-owned businesses? So,
yeah.
Oh my goodness. I mean, I think. Go ahead, Dr. Day.
Oh no, please, Reverend, I can go after you.
Yeah,
please.
I absolutely think capital B Black Church has a responsibility to address in the political sphere, and in the spiritual sphere, and in the practical lived sphere of life, economic injustice, right? And build platforms, build organizations, build processes by which these issues could be addressed. I think that if our people, and black women in particular, are the ones who are most impacted and marginalized and doors closed on and undermined, and if black women are the most financially contributive persons that keep these churches going,
yeah, come on.
We have a responsibility to see, and I love the word, and I use this word in what I do, the flourishing of black women.
Yes.
Because we know that when black women flourish,
come on,
everything and everybody else will too. And so I definitely think we have a responsibility. And while we're on this, I just want to lift this up. Like in my own denomination, my denomination is not a black denomination, right? It is a white denomination who says, who says that we are a movement for wholeness in a fragmented world, right? That our priorities are racial equity, anti-racist, pro-reconciling, right? And yet in the Southwest region where I am, right, there are 380 congregations. 380 congregations. 6 of them are led by black women. 386. That's less than 1.75. Is 1.5% of the congregation. 2 of those 6 congregations were started as new church plants with no initial funding.
Wow.
And of course, one is mine, right?
Right.
There's 7 black clergy women in senior pastor or co-pastor positions out of 920 ministers. Most of those black women do not have fully funded or compensated positions.
Wow.
My.
That is wrong.
Right.
What we doing about that?
And some might say that's evil. In terms of because you know what you're doing, and you know what's not there. You know the representation's not there. And to what you just read, you're not living up to, as King would say, what you put on paper.
Exactly.
You know.
So certainly the black church ought to do better than this.
Come on.
And
let me tell you something else. This is Fannie Lou's classroom. Fannie Lou spoke truth to power. Let me tell you something. Our little black congregation, our little womanist congregation, there are black women that come to us who go to these larger, not Friendship West, who go to these large congregations who can't get help with a light bill.
Ooh, come on. And I'm sure
they come to us, and we take care of it.
And I'm sure they paying some tithes offering to their church.
What is that? So is the black church a plantation? Because certainly black women are the labor of black women is being experienced.
Yes.
What are we doing?
And can I just jump in here?
Please go ahead, because I'm getting fired up now.
Yes, because this is so important. This is where I think Dolores Williams has been the most powerful voice on this question. Yes, the black church should absolutely render visible and have a platform that renders visible the injustices that the black community and black women are constantly enduring. But what I appreciate about Dolores Williams' work is that the question that she poses to the black church, if we are going to make this claim, is how do we do that without reinforcing the surrogacy experiences of black women, right? It is the case that black women are often the backbone of the black church. We are considered, the black churches are built on the pennies and dimes of black women. So that the question of what the black church should do is also the ongoing question about the labor of black women. Yes. And to be honest, the labor of black women inside and outside the black church is so beyond the point of exploitation, it's sad.
It's beyond the point of exploitation.
So it seems to me, right? And so, and this is the direction that Dr. Session was just going in a second ago. Yeah. And so it seems to me that my qualified sense, in the tradition and in the spirit of Dolores Williams, is how do we have that conversation, right, without reinforcing the surrogacy experiences? And my hunch is this. My hunch is on today, when we talk about the flourishing of black women economically and materially, I really do believe that there are what I refer to as, and I write about this in Unfinished Business, there are now multiple centers of black interest that must be involved in black women's thriving. So it is the church, but the truth of the matter is you have the proliferation of other black institutions versus in the 20th and 19th century where that was not the case. So you have black banks, you have black fraternal and social organizations. Yes. You have all these, many of them male-led, on top of that, male-led. And so to me, the question of surrogacy experiences, to me, it means that we have to open up our conversation wider in asking, what about these other black social organizations that in many ways are benefiting from the cultural ethos, the normative values of the black church that black women have created and guarded? How are they, these men that are gatekeepers, even economically, of these black social organizations, how are they answering the question from a religious perspective of how we address black women's economic thriving? So, but I had to say that because what Dr. Session was saying was so on point, and Dolores Williams amplifies this.
Yeah, wow, y'all just did a lot, because we
had a lot of pin-up stuff that we.
We did.
This Fannie Lou stuff, it provided us the platform to get that stuff out. Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Ayers.
Because I think Dr. Carruthers oftentimes says to me when we talk about the plethora of things that are going on, that we are every day becoming more and more of what we detest.
Yes.
that we are mimicking and replicating that which we detest and which we are continue to fight so hard to break free from and deconstruct. We're becoming that, right? And so I'm wondering, and then just practically, right? I think one of the things that Black churches could do is become overnight daycare centers.
Come on now.
Because daycare is a Keri knows now because she has the baby now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm shouting in my office right now.
Because I had no idea till I had friends. I'm like, you pay how much for one child?
People are working to pay daycare.
Yes, for real.
No, for real.
And then, no joke. And then I found out if your child doesn't go to daycare, you still got to pay to hold this. I was like, this is crazy. Yeah. So I'm saying it's also to your point. Like I think Keri, so I think it's policy. I think it's activism. I think it's organizing.
It's some wraparound services.
It's wraparound services that got to go with it. Because while you over here fighting policy, or why I'm even if I'm trying to get a session with you and dream big to find out, I do think I can be an entrepreneur. That takes time.
Of course it does.
So to your point, like, how do we, and I think that now, and I like Dr. Day, how you brought in, not because you're right, we do have more institutions than we had like early 18th, 19th century, right? Or 19th and 20th century for sure. 20th century for sure. So how do we, and to your point, because many of those organizations are still tethered to the church to some degree too, in the ways in which they operate and connect. So it is about how do we get these institutions not to be so heavily male dominated, certainly still patriarchal, right? Hierarchy, and to your point, gatekeeping, because how they even see the value of Black women's labor.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And so it's just a lot of I think a lot of it's deconstructing our mentally. That has to be torn. We have a lot of ideologies that we cannot or have not broke free. It's almost that thing of, we say we broke the chains from the body, but the chains are still in our brains. We're still thinking. And like, if you go all the way back to what you were saying, Dr. Day, about plantation economy.
Yeah, I call that cognitive chains. Cognitive chains,
yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, come on now, doctor.
That's good.
Yeah.
But and I think it's it's so many ways we have to attack this issue, and that's why I wanted to just kind of talk about it so people think, it's just this one way. Well, no, it's a lot of things a lot of work we have to do. And first, we have to talk about it and kind of put a way forward of how we would move forward. So I guess I would. Anything else anybody want to add on that piece in terms of the role of the Black church in dealing with this wage gap for Black women? Because I do think in some of our churches we can just kind of give them, here's some practical things you can do that can help disrupt. What you're doing may not solve the whole problem, but it's going to disrupt some of that. And if we can do it here and here and here, and where do we then find a more just and equitable way to support Black women on what we can do while we're trying to change policies and laws, right? Because we have to do something. I always say sometimes justice is about creating your parallel system.
Absolutely. I like that.
In order to do that, right? It's the both things. We can't wait around on that to happen and to change, right?
I think part of it is what you're doing right here, Danielle, is having this forum, this platform where we can really talk about these issues in very forthright, clear ways that are substantiated with research and scholarship and statistics and practical experiences. So having situations like this is so helpful, right? And preaching this from pulpits, which your pastor does, which I do, which I know Dr. Day does when she preaches, and you and when you and to deconstruct these theologies of oppression, these hierarchical, patriarchal, capitalistic ways of interpreting biblical text, right? Deconstructing that, and then reconstructing and reimagining, right? These biblical texts that oppress women, right? So that work is important as well. So it's all the things, and I think many people are doing all the things, and few organizations, and when I say organizations, I mean churches. Few churches are doing many of the things. We need more people doing more of the things and talking about these things.
Yes. Dr. Day, do you want to add something to that?
No, that's perfect.
Okay.
I mean, you're right on point, Dr. Session, what you're saying.
Okay. So, wow, that hour has gone fast.
Is it time to go?
So what I want to end this. So I want to do two things. I want to end this way. I want to get your final thoughts on the subject. What you want to leave the listening audience with, and then we'll end this segment and shift to my other favorite part of the show after we do that. So I just want to hear any final message you would want to give to people as it relates to this wage gap and how we address that.
Support Black women's businesses. I mean, quite literally, and work for policies that create fair lending.
Yes.
Lending policies. Small grants for small business owners, which would include Black women.
Yes.
Getting the educational and mentoring opportunities, right? That Black women could have in order to grow their business, for example. To me, this is something that we really, really, as a Black community, and those of us who are in positions where we can influence others, we really need to do.
So let me say this, since you said one thing and you're laying out your prescription. So one of the things we started here, we just concluded our first segment. We do CEO, which is a business accelerator program here at Friendship West, and we had 20.
See, this is what I'm talking about. This is the kind of stuff that the churches can do. You're talking about CEO Accelerator Program. So you're saying you have a program where you all are teaching people, Black people, how to be CEOs.
And to run and to get the right infrastructure for your business. And many of them, if some of them did the work to become Hub certified. So now you're in position to get government grants that can help them fund your primary business. So
how do you get more of that information out to the people?
Right. Yes. And we're going to be doing that.
Yes.
That's
we just
wonderful.
finished our first cohort, and so we're really taking this year, the last 8 months of the first cohort to really learn and to see how we can improve the programming and communication marketing so that we will be in a better position of having more people. I think we had 18 to 20 folks
That's great.
to go through.
That's
and
wonderful.
if I recall correctly, the majority of the business owners
were Black women.
And there's got to be money out there somewhere for that.
Yeah, we're looking for it because we need it. Because it costs money, to do this work.
Yeah.
But one young Black woman who went through already has 2 government contracts by going through the program. So thank you for laying out that prescription, but I just want to put that plug in.
I want to add one more thing to the
please
prescription,
do.
just one more thing,
yes, ma'am.
and that is pay Black women.
Yeah, come on.
Yes.
Pay Black women.
Yes.
Whatever that is, they come in consulting, they helping you put something together.
That's right. Yes. And there are all kind of ways to pay, because if you don't have money, do you have a service that you could give them? I mean, but pay them. Compensate them for their labor.
Yes.
Please do, fairly and justly.
Yes.
So thank you for this segment. So now what I want to switch into, because I know both of you, but I still want to hear this. What I like to do, because I always tell people we're more than our vocation, we're more than our profession. So I'd like to hear people know, what brings you joy? What do you enjoy doing when you're not doing the work that you're doing? So either one, you can go first.
I love traveling, particularly to places like the Caribbean, anywhere in the Caribbean.
Yes, ma'am.
I love. What brings me joy is laying on a beach somewhere with a margarita or a daiquiri, looking out at the ocean. I've spent hours just in the ocean. That brings me joy.
Ooh, me too.
I like that.
And we're gonna hit a beach real
we
soon.
I'm doing quite a few beaches.
Well, you're doing quite a few.
Yeah.
That clergy, we need to get that clergy renewal grant.
Yeah. That brings me joy. And of course, my daughter brings me joy.
Oh, yes.
Just having conversations with her,
Yes.
listening to her, watching her grow and become the womanish woman that she is becoming.
Yeah.
That brings me joy.
Nice. Dr. Day.
Wow. And I'm not trying to be a copycat, but as our pastor reminds us, you're going to be a copycat, copy the right cat.
Right.
So
Just copy the right cat.
So with that being said, it's so similar. Like literally, I was going to say that what brings me extreme joy is being able to see parts of the world, because it opens up not only my understanding of myself and the world, but my understanding of God, which is so much more expansive than we can ever grasp. right, understand. And so I love traveling. But then second, right now, one of my sweet joys is getting some chocolate chip cookies, cuddling up on the couch with my daughter, 2-year-old daughter, turning on a Coco Melon or Mickey, whatever she wants to like, and just watching her nibble on that cookie, dance, and us watching TV. Right now, that is one of the most sublime delights because it takes me away from myself, and it reminds me what really matters.
That's right.
So I'm so grateful for her presence.
Yes.
Oh, nice. Ooh, so Dr. Day, Dr. Keri, thank you all for being here. This has been food for my soul today that I didn't know I needed.
Thank you.
I didn't know I needed. So thank you for that. And let's just get, what you going to say, Keri? Like you get ready, you double dutching. You coming in?
I'm sorry. I got to say this. You know what? We had a good old time. When Black folks get together, we get excited, and oftentimes we get loud. And let me just say this. Y'all, I was so excited. I was so excited about what we're talking about. I was pacing my office, and I think I was actually talking and screaming to the top of my lungs. And child, I had a colleague that came to check up on me to make sure I was all right. So today, I thank God for sisters us chopping it up and doing what we do, how we do it.
Yes. One of the things that I've been saying is sisterhood is medicine.
Come on, yes.
And I got some medicine today that I need.
Yes. Yeah, Ashe. Yes. So let's give a round of applause to Keri and Irie for being with us on today.
Yes.
So listen, don't forget, we're here every Thursday, 12 o'clock noon. We love to see you on next week where we will be celebrating the birthday of Dr. Dorothy Irene Height, which was a phenomenal woman. And as we round out Women's History Month, we will celebrate her and have some other great conversation on next week. So make sure you like us on Facebook, like us on Instagram, subscribe to YouTube channel, hit your notification bell so you can be alerted when we go live. And don't forget, you can support Family's Classroom, Brooke, by purchasing your Family Classroom t-shirt that Shirley's modeling so beautifully for us on today. Listen, be blessed. Have an amazing rest of your week and a powerful weekend. And we'll see you here next week at 12 o'clock noon in Fannie Lou's Classroom.
From the church house.